all living things must eat to live. Most creatures hunt, graze, or gather to feed themselves. Yet, not too long after that curious creature, man, rose out of the dust, a new type of labor was being cultivated in that very dust from whence he rose. For from that never-ending need for food has sprung one of the oldest occupations known to man, farming. For centuries, farmers have tilled the fertile slopes of the Willamette Valley, thriving in Oregon's mild climate and temperate biosphere. And yet, in recent years, the role of small farmers across this nation, and even in the lush, rolling hills which so define the Beaver State, has begun to change. The burgeoning world population calls for larger and larger industrial farms, while simultaneously, pressure for sustainability, fueled by fear of climate change, forces small farmers into a prominent position in the market. And in the face of these phenomena, a team of young researchers set out on a quest to answer one driving question. Is local, organic, and sustainable really better? Is there any reason to spend more money for a seemingly equivalent product? And can the way we grow and consume food truly make a lasting impact on our planet? The answer, after hours of interviews, volunteer work, research, and further deliberation. Appears to be a resounding yes. Locally, sustainably, and naturally grown food furthers a sense of community, preserves the environment for future generations, and has a positive impact on the health of consumers. These, amongst many other positive benefits of small-scale, so-called old-fashioned farming, point us to the conclusion that Back to the Future is truly the way forward. But first, we had to get rid of some of our misconceptions. Chief among these was the idea that local farmers struggle because they compete with large-scale industrial farmers. Not true, as it turns out.
I'm John Martinson. I'm living in just south of Oregon City, and I've been a CSA farmer, providing produce to local families for 20 years. This is our 21st season. Well, anybody who's providing food is competing with grocery stores.
Yeah.
But it's not an apples to apples comparison. I essentially think of what I do as a farmer as boutique farming that have a niche of the market that they can capture enough of to make a sustainable business out of.
I'm Bill Vandermolen. My farm is Quick Mill Farms. We raise registered polled Herefords, seed stock, and hay for ourselves. When I sell my meat, I can't sell it as packaged meat or wrapped meat unless I would go through the USDA certifications. It's one of those things that I'm not big enough to do that. I know others that have done it, and they're making sort of a market for those of us that don't, because we can ship our meat to them, and it's sort of it kind of channels in the market. In my case, it just all goes direct to the consumer. The better I can do what I'm doing, the better, as far as breeding stock, the better the commercial guy does in his business, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. My competition is anybody else who's doing it basically the way I am, and in particular here in the Northwest, there's just more people that are interested in this area. I don't know if you see it as much on the East Coast or even in the Midwest, but in the Northwest and the West Coast, people are really concerned about quality food and safe food, and so I could I'm on a small piece of land and I'm using it the best I can. But if I had more, I could probably sell, 10 times what I sell and still not meet the list.
As you can see, industrialized farming has actually created a niche for local and natural farmers seeking to sell their gourmet products. Another common misconception we held is that a product isn't truly natural unless it is labeled as organic. We were under the impression that the relatively high price of organic food corresponds directly to its nutritional value. In fact, a small fruit market owner, who declined to be videotaped, told us about the trouble he's having selling organic food. Because of the price, he said, organic is for a particular economic class of people. A middle-class family with 5 kids cannot justify spending money they don't have on organic food, which can be many times as expensive as regular produce. For example, a box of regular celery costs this vendor $19. A box of organic celery is well over 3 times as expensive, being $64. For now, this store owner is throwing most of his organic selection away. If he's breaking even in 6 months, he says, he'll keep going. The good news is, however, that organic is not the only healthy option, and has perhaps been overhyped by people to whom labels are the sacred scripture in the religion of the healthy diet.
I am not certified organic, and there's a couple of reasons for that, but if you go into the history of the organic movement, certified organic is short for third-party certified organic. When party number 1, the farmer, and party number 2, the consumer, don't know each other, then you need a third party to verify that the farmer is on the up and up. If there's only 2 parties, if the 2 parties involved, 2 primary parties involved, know each other, then the need for having somebody on the outside to be supervising this is less important. The other primary reason for us is that since we don't need the certification so much because of the relationship we have with our customers, we can avoid the expense and the outright cost of certification plus the bookkeeping cost for certification, and pass on to our customers a lower price.
So you can find people who are producing hay, but they're doing it with sort of a minimalist approach. They may be growing hay, and they may not be certified organic, but I know they're not spraying their fields, and they haven't sprayed for a while, or I've had control of their fields for several years, and I haven't sprayed for a while, although it's not certified organic. So I can avoid, some of the costs of, quote, certified organic. So in some ways reduce my costs that way, but I'm still growing or producing my meat in the same way that they are, and I guess if I wanted to do it all and have it totally certified, it probably would be more expensive. But you can almost price yourself out of the market if you're going to do that. I mean, there'll always be somebody who's interested in all the certifications and the purist. There's sort of the paperwork to back it up. But I think most people, if they were here, they can look at how I do things and see that I'm not spraying. I chop my weeds instead of spraying them. I don't use antibiotics in my feed. The hay is all grown locally on pastures where none of that occurs, so I guess people like what they get that way.
'Tis evident that one can get the benefits of organic farming without the certification by paying close attention to the actual practices of the farm. However, some farmers do choose to go through the process, in order to occupy a different niche of the market.
Hello?
We're now speaking to Melissa Coleman of Cloudcap Farms in Boring, Oregon. Her family's dairy farm is affiliated with the Organic Valley Co-op and produces milk for the surrounding area.
So we transferred to organic in 2004, and one of the major reasons that we did it was financial. So the conventional world was not, the conventional milk price, was not steady, and it was pretty low, and it didn't look like it was going to be rising anytime soon. And so we made the choice to switch because it was the financial smart thing to do. We also we followed a few of the organic standards anyways, so it wasn't the most difficult thing to go into. So Organic Valley came to us, and as they do many places, and they have a steady price. So it might not always be higher than a conventional price, but it's a locked-in price, and it doesn't go up and down. It wouldn't matter if we were conventional or organic. If we were doing it on our own, we would not be able to do it.
The point is, however you choose to get your food, keep in mind that a fancy label is not all that makes a product valuable. Organic is one of many ways to ensure that the product you are consuming is up to a certain standard of production. After researching the topic, it became apparent that local farming was advantageous for three main reasons: an emphasis on community, a higher degree of sustainability, and a more healthy product.
The market has grown. It's also changed. One of the big things is that it's gone from being pretty fringe to just fringe, but skirting mainstream. You know, there's widespread awareness of it now.
I don't think I've had someone buy beef and not come back and want more, because it's so different than what's commercially produced and what you find in the average grocery store. A lot of times I hear that once they've tasted that, they can't believe how different it is, and they're not going to go back.
Yet, although interest keeps growing, no amount of interest in the small farmer's produce can make ends meet.
There's the old joke about how do you make $1 million farming? You start out with $2 million. It took quite a while for me to figure a way to farm without losing money. And even now, if I'm doing better than break even, I feel like I'm successful.
To buy land and start a farm from scratch is almost impossible these days. Say, for example, I grew up dairy farming, and I had beef cattle then as well. But it used to be that a 50 cow dairy farm, or to a 100 cow dairy farm would produce enough for a family to live on and pay for all its expenses. You have to have enough profit that you can pay for the family. And now the ag statistics show that you pretty much need to have a 300 to 500 acre farm in order to make enough profit to have a family and have extra and pay for that. And that sort of runs the same with cattle.
And so, as farmers expand in size to compensate for the lower price of food, the sense of community that comes with small family farms has diminished. It is that very same sense of community that small farms are now trying to re-establish, and which appears to be one of the many reasons for the continual growth in interest about local, organic, and sustainable farming over the last few decades.
There's a place for the Costcos and the Walmarts and things like that in the marketplace. And there's also a place for little shops that are pricey.
The way people have fixed this problem is through farms such as John's, which emphasize a direct connection between the consumer and the farmer.
CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. Food with the farmer's face on it. And when you think of the current interest in knowing where your food comes from. Food with farmer's face on it is exactly that. Another thing that's changed is that there's been an interest in say organic food and that kind of stuff, and that has been added to by the Know Your Farmer movement of sorts. It's much less organized than, say, the organic program, which is now administered, at least oversight from the federal government and through various certifiers. But the Know Your Farmer movement has been good for CSAs, but it's been particularly good for farmers markets. And I think farmers markets are doing particularly well because of their social aspect.
Through programs such as CSA, small farmers have been able to reconnect to their clientele, which builds community and trust, as the consumer knows exactly what they are buying and how it is raised. But furthermore, small farms also happen to be much more sustainable than their larger counterparts, especially in the long term. As part of our research, we volunteered at the Birds and Bees Community Farm, where we learned a great deal about the costs and benefits of sustainability. Rather than using traditional watering techniques, such as sprinklers or trenches, many small farmers instead use so-called drip watering in order to preserve water. Tiny holes in the pipes deliver just enough water to let the plants flourish, while conserving as much as possible. This system does save water and thus money, as well as the environment, but is more labor-intensive, requiring manual setup and maintenance. This is a similar sacrifice that is made for hiring human labor rather than using machines. Furthermore, small farms do not use nearly as much diesel or gasoline, an indubitably unsustainable resource, as conventional farms do.
We're at a time of global climate uncertainty. We're at a time when unsure how much we're going to be able to continue using fossil fuel calories to funnel them down, start with lots of fossil fuel calories and end up with a few food calories, because essentially conventional agriculture is turning natural gas and diesel in vast amounts into smaller amounts of food. That's not sustainable in the long term. So we may have to go back to where there's less reliance on big machines, to smarter machines, to more human and possibly animal power involved in the growing of food. And if it does happen that diesel, say, quadruples in price, food is going to get a lot more expensive, and there's going to be a bigger market for the economics of the consumer direct farming that are now so-so. All of a sudden will look a lot better.
When you look at your costs, the costs come into play in probably two areas: the feed cost and the fuel costs. And they're probably related in that the more fuel costs, the higher the feed costs, and especially if you're shipping feed and so on.
And yet, fossil fuels regardless, farming is one of the most sustainable ways to use the earth for good.
When you look at feeding the consumer, what you can do, you look at the country, and there's only so much land that is really farmable, for growing crops and so on. It has to have good soils, good water, and the ability to irrigate, the power to irrigate, and when you have all of that, you've got something really good. But there's a lot of land that can't be used that way to feed the consumers, to feed our population as a country. And so you look at animals like cattle, goats, sheep, even pigs for that matter, depending upon how they're raised. They can turn land that is non-productive for people, that is, doesn't have the required resources. They can grow, they can eat the grass and brush or whatever, depending upon whether it's cattle or goats, and they can produce, a healthy meat product, a source of protein, that then it turns that land into a resource for humans.
Not only is small farming agriculturally sustainable, local farming is economically sustainable as well.
The whole thing of if you're buying from a local business, the recycling of money in the local economy is much greater than if you're buying from a business that is headquartered in St. Louis or LA or Frankfurt, Germany.
If local, responsible farming can once again become the main medium of farming, our world may be able to be farmed for centuries or even millennia to come, which will certainly not be the case with industrial farming. However beneficial local farming may be for the community, economy, and environment, some of the most important benefits which accompany such agriculture are those concerning the health of the consumer.
Doing what I'm doing, as part of the reason that I do it, is that there's just more and more of an increasing interest in the healthiest food you can get. People, the more they find out about pesticides and herbicides, and if you know anything about the chemistry of that, most of those are fat soluble, and then they sit in the meat. And if you are higher up the food chain and you're eating food that has that in you're just piling it more and more into your own fat and your own body, and then it stays there. Some of those things are like radiation. It's a lifetime accumulation that leads to problems. It's not just one dose, although one big dose would be more than enough to do you in.
In fact, the National Institute of Mental Health, in conjunction with the National Cancer Institute, the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health have found multiple connections between pesticide use and cancer. For example, they recently found a link between the use of certain insecticides and aggressive prostate cancer. Meanwhile, there appears to be a connection between some pesticides and thyroid disease in women. Furthermore, in a study led by Dr. Freya Kamel from the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences and Dr. Carolyn Tanner from the Parkinson's Institute, researchers found a link between the use of 2 pesticides and the risk for Parkinson's disease.
But just these small microdoses are what people worry about, leading to, immune problems or cancers or all of those kind of things. So, they like it when they have meat that's essentially clean and free from all of that. And it's just one less thing to worry about. I see a lot of people, they don't often worry about it until they have a family, and then they start thinking about what they want to feed their kids. And suddenly it gets it gets a lot more interesting for them as far as we're a lot more serious about putting the highest quality food that they can in front of their family.
And as the youth of America graduate the halls of the proverbial high school, setting off into the wide world to churn the proverbial butter churn of the world market, we hope they will carry with them the knowledge here imparted, and that the concern for the environment, the economy, and their own health does not perish from this earth. With so many concerns about sustainability, health, and community, a return to the past may be the only road to the future. You've been watching a Penguin Media production in association with Greshnikov Films Incorporated and Beaker Tech Studios. This has been a showing of The Future in Our Past, starring John Martinson and William Vandermolen, with contributions from Melissa Coleman, Ben Vandermolen, Greg Satram, and several anonymous sources. This film was narrated by Aaron Granado. Original music was composed and performed by Stepan Sveshnikov. Special thanks again to Nicholas White, Samuel Wade, and Tucker Price for production support and musical entertainment. Extra special thanks to Jacob Beaker and Nikita Sveshnikov for their technical support and patience. To Mr. Joshua Barstow, we extend a round of exceptional gratitude for his spiritual and economical guidance. This film was filmed on location in Clackamas County, Oregon. Produced by Aaron Granado and Stepan Sveshnikov, all film and sound is property of Penguin Media and may not be reproduced, copied, or distributed in any form without consent from Penguin Media and its associates. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to churn that butter.